I spent a decade scraping for credibility, battling the quiet assumption that I was just there to take notes. Then my sister Brooke came home with a vague story about a fiancé who worked for a tech giant. I assumed he was lying to impress our mother until I opened the doors to our acquisition meeting. There he sat at the mahogany table, not as her future husband, but as the strategic advisor hired to force my hand. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Astera Systems headquarters always smelled faintly of lemon oil and anxious sweat. But today the tension was heavy enough to taste. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, my hands clasped over a leather folio, looking out at the skyline of Cedar Ridge City. I was 33 years old, the chair of the board for one of the fastest-growing enterprise software companies in the Midwest, and I spent every single day waiting for someone to ask to see my hall pass. We were in the middle of the most dangerous quarter in our company history, Halcyon Byteworks, a competitor with pockets deep enough to drown us, had put a standing acquisition offer on the table. It was the kind of number that made early investors salivate and founders lose sleep. The board was split down the middle. Half of them wanted to cash out now, take the golden parachute, and buy islands in the Caribbean. The other half, the side I was quietly aligning with, wanted to hold the line, believing our new architecture update would double our valuation in 18 months. Grant Lasker, our CEO, was pacing the length of the room. Grant was a man who wore suits that cost more than my first car, and he wore them with the ease of someone who had never had to worry about rent. We have to look at the market reality. Natalie, Grant said, stopping to lean his knuckles on the table. Halcyon is not going to wait forever. They want a lock on the mid-market data sector. If we do not play ball, they will buy someone else and crush us on price. I kept my expression neutral. It was a mask I had perfected over a decade of being the youngest woman in the room. We are not refusing to play ball. Grant, I said, my voice steady, we are ensuring the rules of the game favor our shareholders, if we sell now. We are selling the potential of the new platform for pennies on the dollar. I need to see the beta metrics before I whip votes for a sale. Grant sighed, a theatrical exhale that signaled his patience was wearing thin. He checked his watch, a heavy platinum piece that probably cost $50,000. Fine, but the window is closing. We have stakeholders getting jittery. I am bringing in some external eyes to help us streamline the decision process. I frowned slightly. External eyes? Just a strategic advisor, Grant said, waving a hand dismissively as he gathered his papers. Someone who specializes in closing complex tech mergers. We need alignment. Natalie, I will send you the details later. He walked out before I could ask a follow-up question. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the air conditioning, feeling a prickle of unease at the back of my neck. Grant rarely did anything without an angle. My phone buzzed against the polished wood. It was my sister, Brooke. I hesitated. A call from Brooke usually meant one of two things: a catastrophe involving a landlord, or a catastrophe involving a boyfriend. There was rarely a middle ground. I loved my sister fiercely, but loving Brooke was a full-time job that I was already working overtime on. I swiped to answer. Natalie, I need you to come to dinner tonight, she said, her voice breathless and high-pitched. I rubbed my temples. Brooke, I am still at the office. I have a stack of compliance reports to get through. Is everything okay? Everything is perfect, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It was a frantic, brittle kind of happiness. You have to come to Mom and Dad's. I have big news, huge news, and I want you to meet Mason. Mason? I asked. The name was new. Brooke changed boyfriends like most people changed seasonal wardrobes. Mason Crowell, she said, dropping the name like it was supposed to mean something to me. We have been seeing each other for a few months. I know I did not tell you, but I wanted to be sure first. Natalie. He is the one. And he works at a tech giant. He is in the industry, just like you. I paused. My industry was small. If he was at a major player, I might know him, or at least know his firm. Which giant? I asked. She laughed. A nervous titter. You know, one of the big ones. He travels a lot. He's flying in tonight just to meet the family. Please, Nat, it would mean so much to me. He is about to be promoted into something huge. He is going to change everything for us. That phrase, change everything for us, triggered a reflex in my chest. It was the same thing our father used to say before he sank our savings into a franchise restaurant that went belly up in 6 months. It was the anthem of the desperate optimist. Okay, I said, softening my voice. I will be there. 7 o'clock. I hung up and looked at the empty boardroom. I had a merger to fight, a CEO to manage, and a reputation to protect. But as usual, the real crisis was waiting for me in the suburbs. Wexford Glen was one of those Illinois suburbs that looked beautiful in the brochures but felt claustrophobic once you lived there. The houses were all beige siding and brick veneer, sitting on manicured lawns that smelled of fertilizer. I pulled my sedan into my parents' driveway at 7 sharp. My father's truck was parked in the garage, hood up, a project he had been tinkering with for 5 years. Inside, the house smelled of pot roast and lemon pledge. My mother was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter with a vigor that suggested she was nervous. "He is not here yet," she whispered as I walked in, kissing my cheek. "Brooke is in the living room. Be nice, Natalie. She is so excited." I walked into the living room. Brooke was sitting on the edge of the sofa, wearing a dress that I recognized because I had bought it for her birthday 2 years ago. She looked radiant, her blonde hair curled perfectly, her makeup flawless, but her knee was bouncing up and down, a telltale sign of anxiety she had had since we were kids. "Nat," she squealed, jumping up to hug me. "You look great." "Brooke," I said, squeezing her back. "So, where's the mystery man?" "He just texted," she said, pulling away and checking her phone for the 10th time. "His flight from San Francisco got delayed on the tarmac. He feels terrible. He's trying to get a rental car now, but he might be late." I sat down, accepting a glass of wine from my father, who had wandered in from the garage wiping grease off his hands. "So he works in tech?" my father asked, looking at Brooke. "Computers and such?" "He is in strategic operations," Brooke said, beaming. "He deals with high-level infrastructure. He can't really talk about the specifics because of NDAs. You know how it is, right, Natalie?" I took a sip of wine. Non-disclosure agreements were standard. Yes, but usually, you could say the name of the company. "Who is he with?" "Brooke?" I asked gently. "Google? Amazon? Microsoft?" She waved a hand vaguely. "It is a major holding company. They own a lot of the back-end systems. He says he works in a special vertical. It is very complicated. He told me it is safer if I do not know the details, so I do not accidentally leak anything." I felt a small cold knot form in my stomach. That was not how NDAs worked. You did not protect corporate secrets by telling your girlfriend it was safer if she stayed ignorant. You just didn't talk about work. "A special vertical?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, her defensive walls going up instantly. "Why do you have to use that tone?" "I am not using a tone. I said, I am just interested. He is very successful." "Natalie," she said, her voice sharpening. "He travels private sometimes. He's looking at houses for us. He wants to get me out of that apartment complex. He says I deserve better." I looked at her, really looked at her. Brooke was 30 years old, but she still carried the fragility of a teenager. She had bounced from retail jobs to receptionist gigs, always ending up back at square one, usually with a debt I had to quietly pay off. She wanted to be saved. She wanted a hero. The doorbell rang. Brooke jumped up. That must be him. She ran to the door. I stood up, smoothing my skirt, ready to put on my polite board chair face. But when the door opened, there was no man standing there. Just a delivery driver holding a massive, cellophane-wrapped basket. "Delivery for Brooke Collins?" the driver said. Brooke's face fell, crumbling in a way that broke my heart. She signed for it and carried the basket into the living room. It was impressive, I had to admit. High-end chocolates, a bottle of Dom Perignon, artisanal crackers, and a velvet box. "There is a note," my mother said, trying to salvage the mood. Brooke plucked the card from the plastic fork holding it. She read it silently, her lips moving slightly. Read it out loud. "Honey," my father said. Brooke cleared her throat. It says, "My deepest apologies for the delay. The industry waits for no one, but you are worth every second. Looking forward to optimizing our future together. Yours, Mason." The room went silent. Optimizing our future together? It sounded like a LinkedIn request, not a love letter. It sounded like marketing copy drafted by an assistant. "He sent a gift because he felt so bad," Brooke said, her voice trembling. She reached into the basket and opened the velvet box. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings. Not small ones. "Oh, my mother gasped. "Brooke, look at those." "He really loves you," my father said, nodding approvingly. "A man does not send diamonds if he is playing around." Brooke put the earrings on, turning her head to catch the light. "See, Natalie? He is real. He is just busy. He is important." I forced a smile. "They are beautiful." "Brooke," but my mind was racing. Who says optimizing our future in a personal note? And why couldn't she name his employer? The vagueness wasn't privacy. It felt like evasion. But looking at Brooke's teary, happy eyes, I knew I couldn't push it. Not tonight. Tonight, I had to be the supportive sister, not the skeptical investigator. We ate the pot roast. Brooke spent the entire dinner talking about Mason's plans. He was going to pay off her student loans. He was going to take her to Italy. He was going to invest in my father's ideas. He says he sees a lot of potential in the family, Brooke said, stabbing a carrot. He says we just need the right leverage. Leverage? Vertical? Optimizing. I drank my wine and said nothing. The drive back to my condo in the city took 40 minutes. The highway was empty, lit only by the orange glow of street lamps. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I was the one who fixed things. That was my role. When Brooke's car was repossessed 3 years ago, I paid the impound fee when my father needed a specialist for his knee surgery that insurance wouldn't cover. I wrote the check. I had built a career on being the person who saw the cracks in the foundation before the building fell down, and I saw cracks all over this Mason Crowell story. But what could I do? If I told Brooke I thought her fiancé was a liar, she would shut me out. She would run to him, and if he really was some wealthy tech executive who just happened to speak like a corporate brochure, I would look like the jealous, bitter older sister who couldn't stand to see someone else succeed. I parked in my building's garage and took the elevator up to the penthouse. It was quiet. My life was very quiet. I had furniture that matched, a fridge full of organic water, and a bed I slept in alone. I had sacrificed a lot to get to the chair of Astera. I opened my laptop to check my work email before bed. It was a bad habit, but I couldn't sleep without clearing the inbox. There was a message from Grant Lasker. Subject: Strategic Advisor. Natalie, I have confirmed the engagement with the advisor I mentioned. He will be joining us for the board session next Tuesday. He comes highly recommended by the Halcyon team as a neutral facilitator. Let's make him feel welcome. Grant neutral facilitator recommended by the company trying to buy us? That was an oxymoron. I scrolled down. Then I saw it. An email from a sender I didn't recognize. The address was a jumble of alphanumeric characters from a secure, encrypted provider. Subject: Eyes open. I clicked it. The body of the email was short. If you are chairing the Halcyon deal, watch who is whispering in the hallway. You have met him before. There was no signature, just an attachment. I hovered over it, my cybersecurity training screaming at me not to open unsolicited attachments. But the file type was a simple image. JPEG. I opened it. It was a grainy photo, zoomed in on a conference badge. The name on the badge had been blurred out digitally. A heavy black bar across the center, but I could see the lanyard. It was a lanyard from the Global FinTech Summit, dated 4 years ago, and I could see the edge of a jawline, a collar, and a tie. I stared at the image. You have met him before. I had met thousands of people, investors, developers, consultants, grifters. The tech world was a revolving door of faces. I closed the laptop, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I wanted to be present for Brooke. I wanted to help her plan her wedding and be happy that she had found stability. But the world I lived in, the world of hostile takeovers and eight-figure deals, did not allow for distractions. One wrong move, one missed signal, and I would be the woman who tanked the company. I would be the cautionary tale in business school textbooks. I went to sleep, but I dreamed of blurred faces and typed notes that said, "Optimizing your destruction." The next week at Astera was a blur of due diligence meetings. The Halcyon offer was the only thing anyone talked about. The office hummed with that specific frequency of fear and greed. Junior developers were whispering about stock options. Middle managers were updating their resumes in fear of layoffs. I was in my office, reviewing the quarterly projections, when my assistant, David, buzzed me. "Natalie, your sister is on line 1. She says it is urgent." I picked up immediately. "Brooke, is everything okay?" "I need a huge favor," she said. She didn't sound frantic this time. She sounded professional, or she was trying to. "What is it?" "Mason and I are locking down the venue for the engagement party. It is going to be at the Lake Briar Country Club. It is gorgeous, Nat, but they need a wire transfer for the deposit by 5 o'clock today or we lose the date. Mason is in the air again. He is flying to Tokyo, and his banking app is locked out because of the international IP address." I sighed. "How much is it?" $5,000. She said. I closed my eyes. "Brooke, he will wire it back to you the second he lands," she insisted. "I promise. He gave me the account details and everything, but I just can't access it right now. Please, Nat, this is the only date that works for his schedule and my friends." I looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. "Send me the contract." I said, "I want to see what I'm paying for before I send $5,000 to a country club. You are the best. I love you. I will email it right now." 2 minutes later, the PDF appeared in my inbox. I opened it. It was a standard event contract for the Lake Briar Country Club. A cocktail reception, hors d'oeuvres, open bar. The total was hefty, but the deposit was indeed $5,000. I scrolled to the bottom to check the signature line. Brooke had already signed it. Then my eyes drifted to the billing information section. Usually, this would list a person's name, or maybe a couple. But the line for sponsor/payer was filled out in typed block letters. North Pine Advisory Group. I frowned. Brooke had said Mason was paying. Why was a corporate entity listed as the sponsor? I pulled up a new browser tab and typed in North Pine Advisory Group. The search results were thin. A landing page with a stock photo of a glass skyscraper, a slogan, "Navigating Complex Futures." No team page, no address other than a P.O. box in Delaware, no client list. It looked like a shell, a ghost ship. Why was a shell company paying for my sister's engagement party? I picked up the phone to call Brooke back, to ask her who North Pine was. But I stopped. If I asked, she would say she didn't know. She would say Mason handled the billing. She would say I was being paranoid. He works at a tech giant. She had said, he is in a special vertical. I looked at the contract again. The wire instructions were for the country club. But the reference line required the invoice number and North Pine. I opened my banking app. I had the money. I always had the money. That was my curse. I initiated the transfer. $5,000. As the confirmation screen popped up, a notification slid onto my work screen. It was an invite from Grant Lasker's executive assistant. Board session. Introduction of strategic advisor, tomorrow. 10 a.m. boardroom A. I looked at the invite, then back at the North Pine website on my other screen. A cold feeling washed over me, deeper and colder than the one I had felt in the parking garage. It was the instinct that had kept me alive in this shark tank for 10 years. Something was wrong. The pieces were not fitting. The marketing speak love note, the no-show fiancé, the vague job description, the shell company paying for the party, and the anonymous warning. I printed the engagement party contract and slid it into my locked drawer. Then I printed the screenshot of the blurred badge from the anonymous email and put it right on top. I stood up and walked to the window of my office, looking down at the traffic crawling through Cedar Ridge. I did not know it then, but the war had already started. I just hadn't realized I was the target. I went back to my desk and hit reply on Grant's email. Confirmed. Looking forward to it. I lied. I wasn't looking forward to it. I was dreading it. Because deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, I had a terrible suspicion that the tech giant my sister was marrying and the strategic advisor coming to dismantle my company were on a collision course. I packed my bag. I had an engagement party to attend this weekend, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going as a sister. I was going as a witness. I walked out of the office, the heavy glass doors clicking shut behind me, sealing the silence inside. The weekend arrived with a gray, overcast sky that threatened rain but never quite delivered. I drove to the engagement party with a knot in my stomach that no amount of deep breathing could loosen. The Lakebriar Country Club was trying very hard to be elegant. There were crystal chandeliers that needed dusting, and waiters in vests that were slightly too tight. The room was filled with Brooke's friends, girls from high school she had reconnected with, people from her yoga class, and a smattering of relatives who were there for the free booze. I spotted Brooke immediately. She was wearing white, of course. She looked beautiful, breathless, and frantically happy. She was holding a glass of champagne, her eyes darting around the room, and then I saw him. He was standing by the bar, one hand in the pocket of a navy blue suit that fit him a little too perfectly. He was tall, with dark hair swept back, and a smile that seemed to operate on a separate circuit from his eyes. He was listening to my father speak, nodding at exactly the right intervals, projecting an air of respectful fascination. He looked the part. He looked like every mid-level executive I had ever interviewed. Polished, vague, and undeniably expensive. I walked toward them. My heels clicked on the parquet floor. Brooke saw me and shrieked, "Natalie, you made it!" She grabbed my hand and pulled me forward. "Mason, this is her. This is my big sister, the CEO. Or wait, the chair. She is the chair." The man turned. He set his drink down on a high-top table with a deliberate, smooth motion. He looked at me, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Not the recognition of a stranger meeting a girlfriend's sister, the recognition of a predator spotting another predator. Then it was gone, replaced by a warm, charming mask. "Natalie," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, dry, professional. "Brooke talks about you constantly. It is an honor to finally meet the legend." "Mason Crowell," I said, meeting his gaze. "I have heard a lot about you, although you are a hard man to track down." He laughed, a practiced, easy sound. "The nature of the beast. I'm afraid global markets don't sleep. So neither do I. But I made sure to clear the calendar for this. Brooke is worth grounding the jet for." He put an arm around Brooke's waist, squeezing her possessively. She melted into him, looking up at him with adoration that made my chest ache. "So," I said, keeping my voice light, "Brooke tells me you are with a major tech firm. Which one? I am sure we have crossed paths." He smiled, not breaking eye contact. "We operate a bit below the radar. Natalie, infrastructure, back-end logistics, strategic alignment, the plumbing of the internet, so to speak. Not as glamorous as Astera. Of course, I have been following your work on the Halcyon acquisition. By the way, tough position to be in." My blood ran cold. I had never told Brooke about the Halcyon acquisition. It was confidential. It was non-public information. I looked at Brooke. She was smiling, oblivious. "How do you know about Halcyon?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. Mason waved a hand, dismissing the question as if it were obvious. "Industry chatter. It is a small world. Natalie, everyone is talking about it. You are doing a great job holding the line. Most people would have folded by now." He leaned in slightly, his cologne smelling of sandalwood and money. "It takes a strong leader to know when to sell and when to fight," he said softly. "I admire that." I pulled my hand back. It was a threat. It was wrapped in a compliment, dipped in charm, and delivered with a smile. But it was a threat. I need to get a drink. I said. I walked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I went to the bar and ordered a soda water, my hands shaking slightly. I turned back to look at them. Mason was whispering something in Brooke's ear, and she was laughing, throwing her head back. He looked at her like she was a prize he had won at a carnival. But his eyes were scanning the room. They weren't looking at her. They were counting the exits. They were assessing the threats. And when his gaze landed back on me, he didn't smile. He just raised his glass in a silent toast. I reached into my purse and touched the folded piece of paper. The contract listing North Pine Advisory Group. I knew then, I didn't need a background check. I didn't need a confession. The enemy wasn't at the gates. He was in the living room. He was wearing my sister's adoration like a shield. And he had just invited himself into my life. I took a sip of soda water. It tasted bitter. Game on. Mason, I thought, but as I watched him charm my mother, I realized with a sinking dread that I wasn't just fighting for my company anymore. I was fighting for my sister's life. And the terrifying part was, she was going to hate me for it. The party swirled around me, a blur of music and laughter, but all I could hear was the silence of the impending crash. I checked my phone. One new email. Subject: He isn't here for your sister. I didn't need to open it. I knew the rest. He is here for your vote. The morning of the engagement party, before I put on my dress and my armor, I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of black coffee and a laptop that was securely tunneled into a private server. The name on the venue contract, North Pine Advisory Group, had been itching at the back of my brain all night, a splinter I couldn't ignore. I typed the name into a standard search engine first. The result was a sleek, minimalist website. It was all stock photography of glass skyscrapers, abstract nodes of light connecting across a globe, and men in suits shaking hands in blurred motion. The text was heavy on verbs and light on nouns. Accelerating value, leveraging strategic vectors, holistic growth paradigms. It was the kind of language that sounded expensive but meant absolutely nothing. I dug deeper. I ran the domain registration. It had been purchased 6 months ago. I checked the Our Team page. There wasn't one. No CEO, no managing partners, no bios. Just a generic contact us form that probably routed to a void. Then I ran the address listed in the footer, 1400 Market Street, Suite 800, Wilmington, Delaware. I pulled it up on satellite view. It was a shared office complex, the kind of place where you could rent a mailbox for $50 a month and call it a headquarters. I cross-referenced the suite number. Suite 800 wasn't just North Pine, it was also the registered address for a dropshipping company, a defunct crypto exchange, and a mobile pet grooming service. North Pine Advisory Group was a shell. It was a digital facade constructed to move money without a face attached to it, and this ghost ship was paying for my sister's open bar. I closed the laptop. The unease in my stomach wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a cold, hard knot of certainty. My sister wasn't marrying a tech executive. She was marrying a mirage. The engagement party at Lake Briar was in full swing by the time I arrived. Armed with the knowledge that the sponsor didn't exist, I had decided to play the role of the observant skepticism. I needed to see Mason Crowell operate in the wild before I made my move. I watched him from the edge of the ballroom. He was good. I had to give him that. He moved through the crowd of Brooke's friends and our extended family with the easy grace of a politician. He touched elbows. He laughed at the right moments. He listened with an intensity that made people feel like the only person in the room. When Brooke finally pulled him over to formally introduce us, a moment I had already lived through in my nightmares, he was disarmingly humble. "I have heard so much about you." "Natalie," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that seemed to vibrate with sincerity. "Brooke describes you as the backbone of the family. It is an honor to meet the woman who set the bar so high." He didn't look like a grifter. He looked like the cover of a Forbes magazine. He wore a watch that I recognized as a Patek Philippe, though from this distance, I couldn't tell if it was a high-quality replica. "Brooke tells me you are in infrastructure," I said, keeping my tone light, swirling the ice in my soda water. He smiled. a practiced expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes just enough to look genuine. That is the boring word for it. Yes, he said, we focus on platform synergies, modernizing legacy systems for the cloud era. It is mostly about identifying friction points in large-scale data architecture and smoothing them out. I listened to the sentence again in my head. Identifying friction points, platform synergies. It was executive mimicry. He was using the right vocabulary, but he was stringing the words together in a way that lacked specific density. A real engineer or a real tech executive would talk about latency, or server load, or specific coding languages. Mason was talking in brochures. Which platforms? I asked. I am always curious about the stack people are using. He didn't blink. Oh, we are platform agnostic. Really. We build custom middleware solutions. It is very niche. He pivoted immediately, turning his attention to my mother, who was hovering nearby. Mrs. Collins, I have to say, the hors d'oeuvres are excellent. You have wonderful taste. He was slippery. Every time I tried to pin him down on a detail, he greased the conversation with a compliment and slid away. Later in the evening, the air in the room grew heavy with humidity and cheap perfume. I stepped out onto the terrace to get away from the noise. I was checking my email, habitual, compulsive, when the glass door opened and Mason stepped out. He wasn't smiling now. His face was composed, serious. Natalie, he said, do you have a moment? I slipped my phone into my clutch. Of course. He walked to the stone railing and looked out over the dark water of the lake. I know you are protective of Brooke, he said, not looking at me. I respect that. She has been through a lot. She has, I said, which is why I pay attention to the details. He turned his head, resting his gaze on me. It was a heavy look, devoid of the charm he had been spraying around the room inside. I want you to know that I am not just here for her, he said. I am an admirer of your work, too. Astera Systems is in a fascinating position right now. The Halcyon acquisition offer. That is a crucible for any leader. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I had never told Brooke the name of the acquiring company. I had told her we were busy and dealing with a big deal, but I had never said Halcyon. That name was strictly inside the boardroom and under heavy NDA. How do you know about Halcyon? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. He shrugged, a micro gesture of indifference. The valley is a small town. Natalie, people talk. I hear Halcyon is putting a lot of pressure on the board to settle. Grant Lasker is ready to sell, isn't he? But you are the holdout. He knew the internal board dynamics. He knew Grant's position. He knew mine. This wasn't just gossip. This was intelligence. I stepped closer to him. Who are you? Mason? He smiled, and this time it didn't reach his eyes at all. I am just a guy who wants to see everyone get the best outcome. He said, for Brooke, and for you. You should think about the stress you are under. Natalie, sometimes, the best way to lead is to know when to let go. He patted the stone railing, then walked back inside, leaving me standing in the humid dark with my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I found Brooke 10 minutes later. She was in the bridal suite, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. She looked happy, but there was a frantic edge to it, a vibration of anxiety that I knew well. Brooke, we need to talk, I said, closing the door and locking it. She spun around, lipstick in hand. You are ruining it. Nat, I can feel you judging him. Why can't you just be happy for me? I am not judging him, I said, walking over to her. I am worried. Brooke, he knows things about my work that I never told you. He is using a shell company to pay for this party, and he speaks in circles. Brooke threw her hands up. He is private. He told you that. He deals with sensitive data. I grabbed her shoulders, gently but firmly. Brooke, listen to me. How much do you actually know about his finances? About his job? She pulled away, her eyes filling with tears. I know he takes care of me. I know he paid off my credit cards. I know he loves me. Did you sign anything? I asked. The question popped out before I could filter it. Brooke went still, She looked down at her shoes. What did you sign? Brooke? It was just a prenup, she whispered. He said it was standard for people at his level. He has assets to protect. Did you have a lawyer look at it? I asked, feeling the blood drain from my face. He has a lawyer friend, she said, her voice small. He handled it for us. He said it would save us money on legal fees. It was all very fair. Natalie. Mason explained it to me. I closed my eyes. He has a lawyer friend. It was the oldest trick in the Predator handbook. Isolate the target. Control the information. Remove the safeguards. Brooke, I said, opening my eyes. You signed a legal document drafted by his friend without your own representation. Do you realize how dangerous that is? He is my fiancé, she shouted, her voice cracking. He is not trying to trick me. Why do you always think everyone is out to get us? Just because you are alone and married to your job doesn't mean I have to be. The words stung, precise and targeted. I took a step back. I am trying to protect you, I said quietly. I don't need your protection, she cried. I need your support. Mason is going to change our lives. He's going to make sure we never have to worry about money again. Why are you trying to take that away from me? I looked at my sister, desperate, hopeful, terrifyingly naive. And I realized I couldn't win this with logic. She was addicted to the dream he was selling, to break the spell. I would have to destroy the dream, and she would hate me for the wreckage. I will back off. I lied. Just be careful. Brooke, please. I left the party 5 minutes later. I didn't say goodbye to Mason. I didn't trust myself not to claw his eyes out. Monday morning at Astera Systems felt like walking into a funeral parlor where the body was still breathing. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher than usual, the air recycled and stale. I went straight to my office, bypassing the admin station. I needed to focus on the acquisition metrics. I needed to find a reason to tell the board that Halcyon's offer was undervalued, something concrete that didn't rely on gut feeling. My door flew open before I had even set my bag down. It was Marcus Thorne, our CFO. Marcus was a man who usually had the pulse rate of a hibernating bear, but today he looked like he had just run a marathon in a suit. We have a leak, he said, slamming the door shut behind him. I stared at him. What kind of leak? A bad one, he said. He threw a tablet onto my desk. I looked at the screen. It was a screenshot of a private chat room on an investor forum called Alpha Stream. It was a dark pool discussion. Invite only. The post was from a user named Insider Edge. Astera, AST, is bleeding cash on the new dev cycle. Board vote scheduled for Friday the 24th. Acquisition price locked at 42 per share. Get out while you can or short the bounce. I felt a cold sweat break out on my palms. Friday the 24th, I said. We haven't even finalized the calendar invite for the vote yet. I only drafted that date in my personal planner on Saturday. Marcus nodded, his face gray. Exactly. And look at the projection numbers they cite further down. Those are the draft figures from the Q3 simulation, the ones only the executive committee has seen. This wasn't a hack. This was a sieve. Someone with high-level access was feeding data to the market to manipulate the stock price, likely to drive it down so Halcyon could squeeze us harder. Who has access to the Q3 simulation? I asked. You, me, Grant, and the legal counsel. Marcus said, that is the list. Grant. I thought it had to be Grant, but leaking damaging info about his own company? That was risky even for him. Unless he was so desperate to sell that he was sabotaging our standalone value to force the board's hand. Lock down the logs, I said. I want IT to flag every login from the last 48 hours. And Marcus? Not a word to Grant yet. Marcus nodded and hurried out. I sat there, staring at the tablet, the date, Friday the 24th. I had written that date in my physical planner at my kitchen table on Saturday morning, the same morning I was researching North Pine. My stomach turned over. Had someone been in my house? No, that was paranoid. But I had my planner with me. At the party, I had it in my bag. I had left my bag in the bridal suite for 20 minutes while I talked to Mason on the terrace. The bridal suite, where Brooke was, where Mason had access. The intercom buzzed. "Natalie?" It was Grant's voice, smooth and commanding. "Could you come to the breakout area on the executive floor? I want you to meet the advisor I told you about. We are grabbing coffee." I took a deep breath. I smoothed my skirt. I put on my face. The mask of the chairwoman. The Iron Lady of Astera. I walked down the hallway, the carpet silencing my footsteps. I turned the corner into the breakout area, a glass-walled space with an espresso machine that cost more than a Honda. Grant was standing there, holding a ceramic cup. Next to him, leaning casually against the counter, was a man in a charcoal suit. "Natalie," Grant said, beaming. "Come in. I want you to meet the strategic mind Halcyon recommended to help us navigate this transition." The man turned. It was Mason. He smiled at me. The same bland, confident smile he had worn at the engagement party. But here, under the harsh office lights, stripped of the social context of boyfriend, he looked sharper, deadlier. "Hello again." "Natalie," he said. I stopped walking. My feet felt leaden. "Grant," I said, my voice icy. "This is Brooke's fiancé." Grant looked between us, feigning surprise. "Is he really? Well, that is a small world coincidence, but it shouldn't be an issue. Mason comes to us from North Pine Advisory with a stellar track record in MA alignment. He is not an advisor." "Grant," I said, ignoring Mason entirely. "He is a conflict of interest walking on two legs." Mason chuckled softly. "I assure you, Natalie, my personal life and my professional duties are strictly firewalled. Halcyon asked for me specifically because I know how to bridge gaps. And clearly, there is a gap here that needs bridging." I looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly, the context shift unlocked something in my brain. I had seen him before, not just in the photo from the anonymous email. I had seen him years ago, when I was a junior analyst. He looked different then. He had a beard, glasses, and he went by a different name. Miles something, Miles Carver. I remembered the scandal. It was a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio. Miles Carver had come in as a consultant, charmed the CEO, and orchestrated a vendor funnel scheme where the company ended up paying millions to shell entities for services that were never rendered. By the time the board figured it out, the company was insolvent, and Miles Carver had disappeared into the mist with a settlement that included a non-admission of guilt. My heart hammered against my ribs. He wasn't just a fake fiancé. He was a corporate hitman, a parasite that moved from host to host, changing names and faces. "I know who you are," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You are Miles Carver. The logistics scandal. 2018. Mason's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat. Dead shark eyes. "I think you are confusing me with someone else." "Natalie," he said smoothly, "I have never heard of a Miles Carver. I am Mason Crowell, and I am here to help you save this company from your own stubbornness." Grant stepped in, his face hardening. "Natalie, that is enough. You are letting your personal feelings about your sister's relationship cloud your judgment. This is exactly why we need an objective third party." "Objective?" I snapped, turning to Grant. "He is a fraud, Grant. Look at his firm. It is a mailbox in Delaware." Grant's expression turned cold. "I have seen the vetting reports. Natalie, Halcyon vouches for him, and frankly, your hostility right now is proving his point. You are too emotional to lead this vote." I stared at Grant. He knew, or he was so willfully blind that it didn't matter. "I will not allow him in the boardroom," I said. "I am the chair. I control the guest list." Grant took a step closer to me. His voice dropped to a whisper. "And I am the CEO with a fiduciary duty to shareholders. If you block a resource requested by the acquiring firm, you are obstructing the deal. I will have the board remove you for cause before the vote even happens. Do not test me on this." He held my gaze for a long second, then turned back to Mason. "Mason, let's go to my office. We have strategy to discuss." Mason nodded. He picked up his coffee. As he walked past me, he paused. He didn't look at me, But he leaned in just enough for me to hear him. "You should have signed the check for the wedding." "Natalie, it would have been cheaper than this." He walked away, trailing Grant like a shadow. I stood alone in the breakout room, the hum of the espresso machine sounding like a buzzsaw in my ears. I was shaking, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of combat. He was inside the perimeter. He had the CEO's ear. He had the board's fear. And he had my sister as a hostage. I walked back to my office, my mind racing. I needed proof. I needed more than a memory of a face from 8 years ago. I needed hard evidence that connected Mason Crowell to Miles Carver and to the leak. I sat down at my desk. There was a plain white envelope sitting on my keyboard. It hadn't been there when I left. I picked it up. My name was typed on the front. No postage. Someone had walked into my office and placed it there while I was being humiliated in the hallway. I clicked it open. Inside was a single index card. The text was typed in the same font as the gift basket note. "He isn't here for your sister. He is here for your vote." I stared at the card. The message was clear. Brooke was just the Trojan horse. The target wasn't her bank account or her heart. The target was the chairwoman's seat at the head of the table. He wanted me to fold. He wanted me to approve the halcyon deal so he could collect his fee, a fee that was probably buried in the transaction costs of the acquisition. I crumpled the card in my fist. He thought he had me cornered. He thought using my sister would make me weak. He was wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the only person I knew who could dig deeper than a Google search. "Mira," I said when the corporate counsel answered, "I need you to run a level 4 background check. Not the standard one, the one we use for international partners. And I need you to do it quietly." "On who?" she asked. "Mason Crowell," I said, "and cross-reference his biometrics with a man named Miles Carver." I hung up. I looked out the window at the gray skyline. "You walked into the wrong boardroom." "Mason," I whispered. "I wasn't going to just expose him. I was going to bury him, and I was going to do it without letting my sister see the shovel." I opened my laptop and started a new document. Title: Board Governance Inquiry. Incident Log. The first entry: 10:15 a.m. Threat made by external advisor regarding fiduciary obstruction. I typed, and as I typed, I stopped shaking. I was back in the game, and this time, I knew the rules. The best way to catch a liar in a corporate boardroom is not to scream accusations or hire a private investigator to take photos from a parked car. That is the Hollywood version. In the real world, you catch them with paperwork. You suffocate them with the dull, gray weight of compliance protocols until they gasp for air and make a mistake. The morning after my confrontation with Grant and Mason, I walked into the office of our general counsel, Mira Vance. Mira was a woman who treated emotions as inefficiencies. She viewed the world through the lens of liability and risk, which made her the only person in the C-suite I currently trusted. "I need a standard governance check," I said, closing the door behind me. Mira didn't look up from her dual monitors. "On who?" "Mason Crowell." I said, "The new strategic advisor Grant brought in." Mira paused. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Grant already vetted him. He sent around the summary sheet yesterday." I sat down in the leather chair opposite her desk. "Grant's vetting is a handshake and a gut feeling. I want the full governance protocol. We are looking at a potential merger with Halcyon Byteworks. If we have an external advisor in the room with access to non-public material, we need to document his conflicts of interest, his previous board exposures, and his verifiable employment history. It is just a box-checking exercise. Mira, for the insurance." Mira finally looked at me. She adjusted her glasses. "You think he is dirty. I think he is a ghost," I said carefully. "And I think ghosts are a liability," she sighed, then opened a new file. "I will run the level 3 screen. Education, employment verification, litigation search. Give me 24 hours. It took her 30. When I went back to her office the next afternoon, Mira looked annoyed. She slid a thin file folder across the desk. "It is clean," she said, "but it is the kind of clean that gives me a headache." "Explain," I said, opening the folder. "His resume checks out, technically," she said. Leaning back, He lists a master's in strategic management from a prestigious institute in Switzerland. The institute exists. He has the certificate, but when I dug into the course codes, it is not a 2-year degree. It is a 6-week executive seminar that you can essentially buy for $15,000. He is legally allowed to list it, but it implies an academic rigor that isn't there. What about his work history? I asked, scanning the pages. That is where it gets slippery, Mira said. He lists roles at 3 major tech conglomerates over the last 8 years. Director of Special Projects. External Lead for Integration. I called HR at 2 of them. They have no record of him as an employee. I looked up, so he lied. Mira shook her head. No, I dug deeper. He was never an employee. He was a contractor billed through a third-party vendor. He technically worked at those companies, sat in their offices, and probably directed teams. But because he was a contractor, his personnel file doesn't exist in the main database. We can't verify his performance, his reason for leaving, or if he was fired. He is a phantom employee. He gets the prestige of the brand on his resume, but none of the accountability trail. It was brilliant. It was exactly what I expected. And North Pine Advisory? I asked. A holding tank, Mira said. Registered in Delaware. The registered agent is a law firm that specializes in anonymity. It has no assets, no liabilities, and no tax history beyond the minimum filing fees. It is a shell. Natalie, a vehicle for invoicing. I closed the folder. Thank you. Mira, keep this file off the shared drive. She looked at me sharply. Natalie, if you think this guy is a fraud, we need to flag it to the risk committee. Not yet, I said. Being a contractor with a bought degree isn't a crime. It is just sleazy. If I blow the whistle now, Grant will say I am being an elitist snob, and that Mason's results matter more than his pedigree. I need more. I needed perspective. I needed someone who understood the long game. That evening, I drove out to a quiet diner on the edge of the city to meet Elliot Crane. Elliot was 70 years old, a retired compliance officer who had survived the dot-com bubble, the housing crash, and 3 different hostile takeovers. He drank Earl Grey tea and wore cardigans that smelled of tobacco, even though he had quit smoking 20 years ago. I laid it out for him. The shell company, the vague job titles, the pressure on the board, the involvement with my sister. Elliot listened, stirring his tea with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. When I finished, he didn't look surprised. You are looking for a robbery. Natalie, he said softly, you think he's going to steal the acquisition money or siphon off a consulting fee? Isn't that the goal? I asked. Money? Elliot shook his head. That is the old way. The smash and grab. These modern operators, the high-level ones, they don't steal money directly. They steal decisions. I frowned. What do you mean? They shape the reality of the people who sign the checks, Elliot said. This Mason character, he isn't there to defraud the company of a few $1 million. He is there to ensure the acquisition happens at a specific price, on a specific timeline. He is an instrument of inevitability. For Halcyon? I asked. Likely, Elliot said. Or for a group of short sellers, or an arbitrage fund. Someone has a massive position on this deal closing, or failing. Mason is the mechanic sent in to make sure the machine works the way they bet it would. He does that by isolating the dissenters. That is you. He is using my sister to get to me. I said, the bitterness rising in my throat. Of course, Elliot said calmly. Emotional leverage is cheaper than bribery and more effective than blackmail. He creates a situation where investigating him feels like betraying your family. He makes you question your own motives. Are you suspicious because he is shady, or because you are jealous of your sister? He muddies the water so you can't see the bottom. So how do I stop him? You can't outmaneuver him socially. Elliot said, he is better at that than you. You have to wait for him to overreach on the governance. These guys always get arrogant. They think the rules are for other people. Watch the paper trail. Natalie, watch the votes. Watch the minutes. He will slip. I didn't have to wait long for the social maneuvering to escalate. 2 days later, Brooke called me. She was in full wedding planning mode, her voice vibrating with that manic energy that always made me nervous. "Natalie, I have a huge favor to ask," she said. I braced myself. "What is it?" "Brooke? Mason wants to do a small dinner, just family and a couple of his work colleagues. He says he feels like we got off on the wrong foot at the engagement party, and he wants to show you that his world is legit. He wants you to host it." "Host it?" I repeated. "At my place? You have that amazing view of the skyline," Brooke pleaded, "and your kitchen is huge. Mason says it would be more intimate than a restaurant. He wants his colleagues to see that we are a close family. It is important for his image." "Nat, please?" I hesitated. My apartment was my sanctuary. It was the one place Mason hadn't invaded yet. But Elliot's words rang in my ears. "He muddies the water. If I said no, I was the cold, unsupportive sister. If I said yes, I was letting the fox into the henhouse. But if I said yes, I could also observe. I could see who these colleagues were." "Fine," I said. "Friday night, but keep it small." Friday night arrived, and so did Mason, Brooke, and 2 men who looked like they had been cloned in a lab that specialized in aggressive capitalism. Mason brought a bottle of wine that I knew retailed for $400. He was charming, deferential, and acted as if our tense conversation at the party had never happened. "Natalie, thank you for welcoming us," he said, handing me the bottle. "This is Greg and Simon. They work with me on the capital side." Greg and Simon shook my hand with grips that were a little too firm. They were both in their late 30s, wearing vests over dress shirts, and they had the hungry, restless eyes of men who checked stock tickers in the middle of sex. We sat in my living room, the city lights glittering behind us. I had put out a spread of cheeses and fruits, trying to be the gracious hostess. "So, Natalie," Greg said, balancing a cracker on his knee, "Mason tells us things are heating up at Astera. Exciting times." I took a sip of water. "We are always busy." Greg, "Software never sleeps." Simon chuckled. "Especially with a suitor like Halcyon knocking at the door. I hear their offer is generous. 42 a share? That is a nice exit for the founders." I looked at him sharply. The $42 figure had been floated in the Alpha Stream leak, but it wasn't official public knowledge yet. "We don't comment on market speculation," I said coolly. Of course. Of course," Mason interjected smoothly, placing a hand on Brooke's knee. "Natalie is the soul of discretion. That is why she is the chair. She protects the fort." Brooke beamed at him, then looked at me. "Isn't he sweet? Nat? He's always telling everyone how proud he is of you. He says you carry the weight of the whole world on your shoulders." Mason looked at me, his expression oozing empathy. "It must be exhausting. Natalie, truly, balancing the fiduciary duty with the operational reality? Most people would have taken the golden parachute by now and retired to Napa. It takes a specific kind of personality to keep fighting when the war is already over." The room went quiet. It was a perfect insult, wrapped in a compliment, delivered with a smile. He was calling me a control freak who didn't know when she was beaten. I am not fighting a war. "Mason," I said, my voice steady, "I am evaluating a business transaction." "There is a difference," Brooke laughed nervously. "Oh, listen to you two. Business, business, business. Can we talk about the wedding?" "Mason, show them the venue photos. For the rest of the dinner." I watched the dynamic. Mason used Brooke as a human shield, every time I tried to steer the conversation toward his work. He pivoted to Brooke's happiness. He would ask her to tell a story about our childhood, usually one where I was the responsible, boring older sister, and she was the fun, chaotic one. "See?" Mason said after Brooke finished a story about me saving her from a bad decision in college. "Natalie has always been the fixer. She sacrifices her own fun to make sure the rules are followed. It is a noble trait, a bit lonely, perhaps, but noble." He was dissecting me in my own living room. He was painting a portrait of me as a bitter, lonely workaholic, and he was doing it so skillfully that Brooke was nodding along, thinking he was praising me. When they finally left, My apartment felt contaminated. I put the $400 wine bottle in the recycling bin, unopened. The following Monday, the psychological warfare moved from my living room to the company intranet. I walked onto the sales floor to get a coffee, and the atmosphere was toxic. People were huddled in clusters, whispering. When they saw me, they stopped talking and looked down at their screens. I cornered the VP of sales, a woman named Karen who had been with us since the startup days. "Karen, what is going on?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes tired. "You haven't seen the survey?" "What survey?" She pulled up her phone and showed me an email. It was a morale and sentiment survey, sent from a generic internal address, hr-feedbackastera.com. The questions were loaded, designed to trigger panic. 1. On a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you that the board's refusal to accept the acquisition will lead to immediate solvency issues? 2. If the merger fails, are you prepared for a potential reduction in force of up to 30%? 3. Do you believe the current leadership prioritizes their personal legacy over employee financial security? My jaw tightened. This wasn't a survey. It was a push poll. It was propaganda designed to incite a mutiny. I marched straight to the HR director's office. "Did you send this?" I demanded. Showing him the screenshot, he looked horrified. "Absolutely not. We don't use that template, and we would never ask questions like that. That is actionable fear-mongering. Track the IP." I said. "Find out who sent it." I knew who sent it, or at least, I knew who ordered it. It was the strategic advisor creating the inevitability Elliot had talked about. If the employees believed the company would collapse without the deal, they would pressure the leadership, they would leak to the press, they would create chaos. I went back to my office, my head pounding. I sat down to check my calendar for the week. I blinked. There was a meeting block on my calendar for Thursday afternoon. Chair alignment session. Closed door. I hadn't scheduled it. I clicked on the invite. Attendees, me, Grant Lasker, Mason Crowell, and Darren Klein, a board member who had been leaning toward the sale. I checked the history log. The invite had been created from my account at 6 o'clock this morning. I had been in the shower at 6 o'clock. Then, as I watched, the meeting disappeared. It just vanished from my calendar view. I frowned. A glitch? I called Darren Klein. "Darren, this is Natalie. Did you just get a meeting invite from me for Thursday?" Darren sounded irritated. "Yes, Natalie. And then I got a cancellation notice 5 minutes later. And now I see it back on my calendar again. What are you doing? Make up your mind. We are all busy here." I felt a cold prickle on my neck. Someone was spoofing my calendar. They were making me look erratic, disorganized, and indecisive. They were gaslighting the board through Outlook. I didn't cancel it. "Darren," I said, "it is an IT issue." "Sure, Natalie," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Just let us know when you are ready to actually lead the meeting." I hung up. My hands were shaking. This was the modern influence Elliot had warned me about. They weren't hacking the bank account. They were hacking my credibility. I stormed into Grant's office. I didn't knock. Grant was sitting at his desk, looking relaxed, reviewing a slide deck. "We need to talk," I said, slamming the door. Grant looked up, unperturbed. "Good morning to you too, Natalie. Someone is manipulating the internal messaging. Grant, fake morale surveys terrifying the staff. Calendar invites being sent from my account that I didn't create, and your advisor Mason is at the center of it." Grant took off his reading glasses. "Natalie, you are sounding paranoid again. The survey was probably a rogue middle manager worried about their stock options, and Outlook glitches happen all the time. It is not a glitch." "Grant," I snapped, "it is a campaign. Mason is destabilizing the company to force the vote. He is poisoning the well." Grant stood up. He walked around his desk and leaned against the front of it, crossing his arms. "Let's assume, for a second, that you are right," he said quietly. "Let's assume Mason is pushing hard. Do you want to know why?" "Tell me," I said, "because Halcyon is 48 hours away from walking." Grant said, The CEO of Halcyon called me this morning. They are tired of the board dragging its feet. They are tired of you dragging your feet. They told me that if we don't have a clear path to approval by Friday, they are pulling the offer and dumping their current holdings of our stock. I stared at him. That is a bluff, is it? Grant asked. Are you willing to bet the livelihood of 3,000 employees on that? Because if they dump the stock, we crash. And if we crash, we lay people off. Mason is the bridge. Natalie, he is the only one keeping Halcyon at the table. He is doing the dirty work that you are too principled to do. He is lying to us. Grant, he is a fraud. He is a closer, Grant shouted, losing his cool for the first time. And right now, we need a closer, not a librarian. The room rang with the silence after his shout. I took a breath. I straightened my blazer. If you let him break the governance rules, Grant, you are liable. When the SEC looks at this deal, they won't look at Mason. They will look at you. Grant sneered. Then you better make sure the deal goes through smoothly so they have no reason to look. I left the office early. I felt suffocated. I needed to save the one thing that mattered more than the company. I drove to Brooke's apartment. I needed to try one last time to reach her before she was legally bound to this man. Brooke was home, surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric swatches. She looked exhausted but happy. Nat, come in, she said. Look at these color palettes. I am thinking sage and gold. Brooke, sit down, I said gently. She froze. The smile dropped. What is it? Did something happen to Mom? No, Mom is fine. It is about the prenup. Brooke groaned and threw her head back. Oh my God. Natalie, can we please not do this? I sat down next to her on the sofa. I am not telling you not to marry him. I am just asking you, begging you, to get independent counsel. I will pay for it. I will get the best family lawyer in the city. Just have someone who works for you read the document. Brooke stood up and walked to the kitchen. Her back was rigid. Why can't you just trust him? She asked, her voice shaking, because people with money protect their money. Brooke, I said, if he is as wealthy as he says, he wouldn't mind a fair review. If the document is fair, a lawyer will say so. What is he afraid of? He is not afraid of anything, Brooke yelled, spinning around. You are the one who is afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that I might actually be happy, she screamed. Tears were streaming down her face now. You can't stand it, can you? You are the successful one. You are the chairwoman. I am just the screw-up sister who needs to be bailed out. But now I have someone who takes care of me. Someone who treats me like a queen. And you are trying to destroy it because you are miserable. Brooke, that is not true. It is true, she sobbed. Look at your life. Natalie. You are 33, you live alone, you work 18 hours a day, and your only relationship is with your laptop. You are married to your work because no real person could ever measure up to your standards. You are jealous because Mason loves me, and you have no one. The words hit me like physical blows. They were the specific, cruel truths that only a sibling knows how to weaponize. I stood there, feeling the blood drain from my face. Is that what you think? I whispered. Yes, she said, wiping her eyes aggressively. So if you can't be happy for me, just leave. Please, just go. I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the anger. She was terrified that I was right. So she had to believe I was a monster. I am sorry. Brooke, I said. I picked up my purse. I walked to the kitchen island to grab my keys. They were sitting on top of a stack of papers, part of her wedding planning binder. My hand froze. Sticking out of the binder, half hidden under a photo of a floral arrangement, was a piece of paper that didn't belong. It wasn't a catering menu. It wasn't a guest list. It was a printed spreadsheet. The header was bold and red. Confidential. Astera Systems Board eyes only. It was the revenue projection memo I had circulated in the boardroom 3 days ago. Hard copy only, numbered copies. I stared at it. The text blurred for a second, then snapped into focus. It was folded in quarters, like someone had shoved it into a pocket and then smoothed it out. I looked at Brooke. She was still crying, her face buried in her hands, her back to me. "Brooke," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "Where did you get this?" I pulled the paper out. Brooke turned around, her eyes red and puffy. "Get what?" "This," I said, holding up the confidential memo. She squinted at it. "I don't know. It was just in the pile of stuff Mason brought home. He said it was scrap paper for notes." Scrap paper? My confidential board memo. The one that contained the breakdown of our weakness in the Asian market. The one that, if leaked, would give Halcyon the leverage to drop their offer price by 10%. Mason had taken it. He had taken it out of the secure room, and he had left it here, in my sister's kitchen, mixed in with photos of peonies and hydrangeas. He was using her apartment as a safe house for his espionage. He knew I couldn't raid my sister's home. Brooke saw the look on my face. She stepped forward. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is it important?" I looked at the document. Then I looked at my sister. "No," I lied. "It is nothing. Just work stuff." I folded the paper and put it in my purse. "I am leaving." "Brooke," I walked out of the apartment. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs, all 6 flights, my heels clanging on the concrete. I had the proof. I had the physical evidence of a breach of confidentiality, but as I walked out into the cold night air, I realized something terrifying. Mason wasn't just sloppy. He didn't just leave it there. He left it there for me to find. He was taunting me. He was showing me that he could put the poison right in the heart of my family, and there was nothing I could do about it without detonating Brooke's life. I gripped the steering wheel of my car. "Okay, Mason," I said to the empty garage. "You want to play dirty?" I started the engine. "Let's play dirty." The morning after finding the confidential memo in Brooke's kitchen, I didn't storm into the office. I didn't call the police. I didn't even call Grant. I woke up at 5 o'clock, made a pot of coffee, and put on my most severe suit, a charcoal gray that looked like armor. I had realized something in the silence of my apartment. Anger was a liability. Grant and Mason were counting on me to be emotional. They wanted me to be the hysterical sister, so they could dismiss my concerns as personal drama. If I wanted to win, I had to stop being a sister and start being a bureaucrat. I arrived at Astera before the cleaning crew had finished vacuuming the lobby. I sat at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. I started a log. Every interaction, every email, every hallway conversation. If it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. I sent a formal request to the corporate secretary. "Please ensure verbatim minutes are taken for all future executive sessions, including off-record strategy discussions. Any deviation from this protocol will be noted as a governance failure." Then I forwarded the chair alignment calendar spoofing incident to IT security, copying Mira Vance. I didn't ask what happened. I wrote, "Please provide a forensic access log for my Exchange account between the hours of 4 and 7 a.m. on Tuesday. Validate IP origin and device ID." I was building a wall. Brick by boring brick, by 10 o'clock, the head of IT security, a man named Patel, who usually avoided eye contact with executive leadership, knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Collins, regarding your request on the email access," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Come in. Patel, close the door." He sat down, clutching a tablet. We ran the logs. There was definitely an authentication handshake at 6:14 a.m., creating that calendar invite. "Who was it?" I asked. "That is the strange part." Patel said, "It wasn't a hack in the traditional sense. It wasn't a brute force attack from Russia or China. The system recognized the device as trusted." I frowned. "Which device?" He looked at his tablet. It was an iPhone 12. The unique device identifier matches a phone that was registered to your account 3 years ago. It hasn't been active on the network for 18 months, but the token was never revoked. I went cold. 3 years ago. I thought about my old phone. I had upgraded last year. I usually traded them in, wiped and factory reset. But 3 years ago, that was the year Brooke had her car repossessed. I had given her my old phone because she had smashed hers and couldn't afford a replacement. I had wiped it, hadn't I? Or had I just signed out of iCloud and handed it over in a rush, leaving the deep-level authentication tokens for the corporate VPN buried in the keychain? Patel, disable that token immediately, I said, my voice flat, and force a global password reset for my account. Two-factor authentication on everything. Hardware key only. Understood, he said. He left. I stared at the closed door. Mason didn't hack me. He didn't have to. He just had to ask Brooke to borrow her backup phone for a second. Honey, my battery is dead. Can I use yours to check the time? He was mining my sister's digital life for keys to my castle. An hour later, Mira Vance buzzed me. Natalie, come down to my office. I found something on North Pine. I went down. Mira had her office blinds drawn. She had a whiteboard covered in printed flowcharts. I told you North Pine was a shell, she said, tapping a box on the whiteboard. But shells usually nest. I ran a cross-reference on the registered agent address in Delaware. It is used by 40 other entities. Most are garbage. But one caught my eye. She pointed to a box labeled Viridian Human Capital. Does that ring a bell? She asked. I squinted at it. Viridian, yes. They pitched us last month. HR software, employee retention analytics. Exactly, Mira said. They pitched a pilot program to analyze flight risk among key engineering talent during the acquisition. Grant was very keen on it. He asked me to fast-track the vendor approval. I remember. I said, he said it would help us lock down the talent pool so Halcyon wouldn't get spooked by attrition. Mira nodded grimly. Well, look at the ownership structure. Viridian is owned by a holding company called Blue Cedar Partners, and Blue Cedar Partners shares a bank routing number with North Pine Advisory Group. I felt the air leave the room. So Mason isn't just an advisor. I said, he is trying to install spyware on our network. If we had approved that Viridian contract, Mira said, we would have given them root access to our entire employee database, salaries, performance reviews, home addresses, social security numbers. They would have had enough data to blackmail every key engineer in the company, or enough data to curate the perfect layoff list for Halcyon. I said, Mira looked at me. Natalie, this is industrial espionage. We need to go to the FBI. No, I said, not yet. Why? Mira demanded. We have the link, because Grant signed off on the Viridian introduction. I said, if we go to the FBI now, Grant claims ignorance. He says he was duped just like us. Mason disappears, North Pine dissolves, and the deal probably collapses, taking the stock price with it. I need to prove Grant is complicit. I need to prove he knows. Mira looked at the whiteboard. You are playing a dangerous game. Natalie, I know. I said, but I'm not folding. I needed to see the board clearly. I needed to know who else was compromised. I spent the next 2 days in a state of hypervigilance. I sat in committee meetings and said almost nothing. Just watching. I listened for the echo. Mason had a specific way of speaking. He used phrases like frictionless transition, legacy mindset, and market inevitability. I heard it first from Darren Klein. Darren was a venture capitalist who sat on our audit committee. He had always been aggressive, but usually he was focused on margins. In the risk assessment meeting, Darren leaned forward. We are overanalyzing the regulatory hurdles, he said, tapping his pen. The market inevitability is clear. If we don't embrace a frictionless transition, we are just protecting a legacy mindset. I looked at him. He was reading from the script. Then I heard it from Susan Chang, the head of the compensation committee. We need to align our incentives to ensure the deal closes, she said. Halcyon wants to see that we are ready to integrate. We shouldn't let process become an obstacle to value. Process as an obstacle. That was a Mason line. He had said it to me at the party. They were being worked. Mason was meeting with them, charming them, probably promising them board seats in the new entity or threatening them with reputational damage if the deal failed. I looked at Darren Klein again. He was checking his phone under the table. He looked smug. He looked like a man who had already bet on the winner. I had to talk to Brooke again, but this time, I couldn't be the angry sister. I had to be the person who understood. I called her and asked to meet for coffee. Not at her apartment, where Mason might have bugs, not at my place, a neutral ground, a noisy cafe on Marrow Street where we used to go when we were teenagers. Brooke looked tired. The manic energy of the engagement was starting to fray at the edges. She ordered a latte with extra sugar. "I am sorry I yelled at you," she said, looking at her foam. "I deserved it. I lied. I have been stressed. I have been taking it out on you." She looked up, relief washing over her face. "It is okay. Nat, I know you are under a lot of pressure. Mason says the deal is getting really intense." I nodded. That is actually what I wanted to ask you about." I leaned in, keeping my voice soft. "Brooke, I know Mason has been helping you out, financially." She stiffened. "We don't have to talk about that." "We don't," I said, "but I need to understand something. Did he pay off the student loans directly? Or did he give you the money to do it?" She hesitated. He handled it directly. He said he has a banker who manages his transfers. He just asked for my account login numbers so he could link them and zero out the balance. He said it was faster than a wire transfer. I closed my eyes for a second. He had her login credentials. That was generous of him. I said, she said defensively, "It was $30,000. Natalie, I was drowning. The interest alone was killing me. He just made it go away." He said, "Future Mrs. Crowell shouldn't have debt." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "You have to understand, Nat, it wasn't just the money, it was the relief. I have spent 10 years being scared to open my mailbox." He made the fear stop. I reached across the table and took her hand. I felt the tremble in her fingers. "Brooke, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not judging you. I would have taken the help too. But I need you to think about a hypothetical situation." She pulled her hand back slightly. "What hypothetical?" "Imagine I was dating a guy." I said, "And imagine this guy kept asking me questions about your medical history or your private diary. And imagine I found out he was using my laptop to read your emails. That is not the same." She said, "Is it?" I asked. "Brooke, Mason isn't just asking about me because he is proud. He is asking because I am the only thing standing between him and a very large paycheck. He doesn't need the money," she insisted. "He works for a tech giant." "Does he?" I asked. "Have you ever seen his office? Have you ever met his boss? He works remotely. He travels." I took a breath. I decided to take the risk. "Brooke, if the roles were reversed, if you were the one protecting something important, and my fiancé was asking you for access codes, what would you tell me?" She stared at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes. It was tiny, a spark in the dark. But it was there. She was naive, but she wasn't stupid. She knew, deep down, that Mason's questions were too specific. She knew that scrap paper shouldn't have confidential headers. "I would tell you to be careful," she whispered. I nodded. "That is all I'm asking. Brooke, be careful. Watch him. Don't ask him anything. Just watch." She looked down at her latte. She didn't say yes. She didn't promise to leave him, but she didn't storm out. It was a start. When I got back to the office, the third anonymous message was waiting for me. My inbox had been locked down by IT, but this one had been slid under my office door in a plain manila envelope. No postage. Internal delivery. I opened it. It was a photograph, high resolution. It looked like it had been taken with a long lens. The setting was a hotel lobby bar. The timestamp in the corner was dated 6 weeks ago. In the photo, 3 men were sitting at a low table. One was Grant Lasker. One was the CEO of Halcyon Biteworks, a man named Thomas Vance, no relation to Mira. And the third man, leaning in with a smile, was Mason Crowell. They were laughing. There were drinks on the table. Grant had told the board he met Mason 2 weeks ago, when Halcyon recommended him. He said he had just been introduced. This photo proved they had been coordinating for at least a month before the formal offer was even made. This was collusion. This was a conspiracy to defraud the shareholders by fixing the deal process. My hands shook as I held the photo. This was the smoking gun. But who sent it? He isn't here for your sister. He is here for your vote. Someone inside the circle was leaking. Someone who hated Mason, or hated Grant, or just had a conscience. I put the photo in my safe. I didn't digitize it. I buzzed Mira. Meet me in the secure conference room in 10 minutes. Bring a witness. I didn't call Grant to the conference room. I went to him. But I brought Mira and the external compliance auditor we had on retainer, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah. We walked into Grant's office. He was on a call. He looked annoyed at the intrusion. "I will call you back," he said into the headset, then took it off. "What is this? Natalie? A raiding party?" "We need to clarify the timeline of your engagement with North Pine Advisory," I said. Standing in front of his desk, Grant sighed. "We have been over this. I met Mason 2 weeks ago. Halcyon suggested him. I vetted him. He is here. Move on." I placed a photocopy of the picture on his desk. Face down. I slid it toward him. "Are you sure about that timeline, Grant?" He looked at the paper. He didn't flip it over immediately. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "What is this?" "Turn it over." He flipped it. For a second, his face went blank. Total stillness. Then, the color rose in his neck, a flush of red. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that it is dated October 12th, 6 weeks ago. You told the board you had no prior contact with Halcyon's advisors until the offer letter was received on November 1st. Grant stared at the photo. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. It was networking. "Natalie," he said, leaning back. It was an informal industry mixer. "We ran into each other. We had a drink. That is not a crime. You are discussing deal terms." I said, "Look at the notepad on the table in the photo." He looked closer. "You lied to the board." "Grant," I said, "you didn't vet Mason. You brought him in because you and Halcyon cooked this up together. You are trying to railroad this acquisition through, and you are using a professional fix-it man to do it." Grant stood up. He walked to the window. "You want to talk about reality, Natalie? Here's the reality. The market is softening. If we don't sell to Halcyon now, our stock goes to $20 a share by Q1. I am saving this company. I am saving everyone's equity. Yes, I met them early. Yes, we strategized on how to get the board to see reason. Because I knew you would be a problem." He turned to face me. "And if you use this photo, if you blow this up, the deal dies. Halcyon walks. The stock tanks. And 3,000 people lose half their retirement savings. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the righteous captain who sank the ship just to prove a point about protocol?" He was weaponizing the employees again. "I am not sinking the ship. Grant," I said, "I am stopping a mutiny." "You are a fool," he spat. "Mason Crowell is the best thing that happened to this deal. He is keeping the wolves at bay." "And what happens when the wolves are inside?" I asked. Grant laughed bitterly. "We are all wolves. Natalie, some of us just admit it." He pointed a finger at me. "If you leak this photo, I will sue you for breach of fiduciary duty. I will claim you doctored it. I will claim you are unstable. And with your sister's little drama going on, who do you think they will believe? The CEO with a 30-year track record, or the emotional sister who is jealous of her brother-in-law?" He knew. He knew exactly how to play it. I picked up the photocopy. "I am not leaking anything. Grant," I said, "I am just adding this to the file." I walked out. Mira and Sarah followed me, silent and pale. In the hallway, Mira grabbed my arm. "He is right about one thing," she whispered. "If we release that photo without a governance vote, it looks like a personal vendetta. We need to nail him on something that isn't subjective. We need to catch them leaking." "I know," I said, and I knew exactly how to do it. The canary trap is an old spy trick. It is simple, elegant, and devastating. If you suspect a leak, but you don't know who it is, you tell different versions of a lie to different suspects. When the lie comes back to you, you know who spoke. I needed to know who on the board was Mason's creature. I suspected Darren Klein, but I needed proof. I drafted a memo. Subject: Revised Q4 revenue projections. I created 3 versions of the document. In version A, I projected a revenue increase of 8.2%. I sent this to Susan Chang. In version B, I projected a revenue increase of 9.5%. I sent this to the quiet board member, Robert. In version C, I projected a revenue increase of 7.4%, a specific, slightly disappointing number. I sent this to Darren Klein. I marked them all confidential, draft, do not distribute. I sent them out at 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Then I waited. I sat in my office, refreshing the AlphaStream forum and the industry gossip blogs. I had set alerts for Astera and revenue. It took 16 hours. Thursday morning, at 9 a.m., a post appeared on a niche financial analysis blog called The Tech Oracle. The headline read, Astera growth slowing? Insiders peg Q4 at 7.4%. 7.4%. Darren Klein. I sat back in my chair. The adrenaline was cold this time. It wasn't the frantic heart-pounding of before. It was the icy clarity of the executioner. Darren Klein was the leak. He was feeding Mason's narrative that the company was slowing down, justifying the sale to Halcyon. But I wasn't done. I needed to know the extent of the coordination. I walked down the hall to Darren's office. He was a non-executive director, but he kept a temporary office on the executive floor for audit work. His door was ajar. I heard him on the phone. I stopped just out of sight. Yeah, the post is up. Darren was saying. No, it looks organic. The market is already reacting. The stock is down 2 points. Yeah, she is clueless. She thinks it is an IT breach. Listen, Mason, when do we trigger the vote of no confidence? Okay, Monday. Good. I will circulate the motion. Right, for stability. She is too unstable to lead. I stood there, listening to my own execution being planned. Trigger the vote of no confidence. Monday, too unstable to lead. They were going to remove me. They weren't waiting for the vote on the acquisition. They were going to decapitate the board first, install Darren as interim chair, and push the deal through before anyone could ask questions about North Pine or Viridian. I backed away silently. I walked back to my office. I had the name. I had the method. I had the timeline. Monday. Today was Thursday. I had 4 days to turn the tables. I looked at the picture of my sister on my desk. She was smiling, holding a trophy from a high school debate tournament. We looked so alike then. I picked up the phone and called Mira. Get the external governance observers ready for the Monday meeting. I said, Why? Mira asked. Are we canceling it? No. I said, We are going to let them walk right into the trap. But Natalie, if they call a vote of no confidence, and they have the numbers, they won't have the numbers. I said, because by Monday, they won't be voting on me. They will be voting on their own survival. I hung up. I opened my laptop and started typing the agenda for the final showdown. Item 1, call to order. Item 2, review of strategic offers. Item 3, governance integrity and disclosure of material conflicts. I stared at item 3. That was the kill switch. I was ready, but as I closed the laptop, a text message popped up on my phone. It was from Brooke. Mason is acting weird. He just packed a bag. Says he has to go to a safe site for the weekend. He took his laptop and the binder. Natalie. I'm scared. My eyes locked on the message. Safe site. He was going to ground. He knew the endgame was coming. I texted back. Stay put. Do not sign anything. I love you. I put the phone down. Monday. I thought, hey. On Monday, Mason Crowell would walk into my boardroom thinking he was the hunter. He was about to find out what happens when the prey has been taking notes. The weekend before the final board vote was not a time of rest. It was a time of cold, forensic assembly. I sat in the conference room with Mira Vance on Sunday morning, the air conditioning humming its low, artificial song. The city outside was quiet, a gray blanket of fog rolling off the lake. But inside, we were building a weapon, We cannot just walk in there and say he is a liar, Mira said, sliding a binder across the table. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She had not slept much either. Grant will spin it as a personality clash. He will say you are hysterical. He will say you are letting your family drama infect the boardroom. We need a sequence. Natalie, a kill chain. I looked at the whiteboard where we had mapped out the strategy. Motive, method, evidence, governance remedy. It had to be clinical. It had to be boring. If I got emotional, if my voice cracked, if I mentioned my sister's name with anything other than objective detachment, I would lose. Okay, I said, picking up a marker. Let us review the packet. Mira opened the first section. Exhibit A, she said, the canary trap. You sent a draft memo with a unique data point, 7.4% revenue growth, only to Darren Klein, 12 hours later. That exact figure appeared on the tech oracle. We have the email timestamp? I asked. Mira nodded. And the screenshot of the blog post. And thanks to IT security, we have the access log showing Darren opened the file on his mobile device 20 minutes before the blog post went live. It is circumstantial, but combined with his motion to remove you, it establishes a pattern of coordination. I checked the box on the whiteboard. Leak identified. Exhibit B. Mira continued. The authentication attack. The attempt to spoof your calendar came from an iPhone 12 registered to your personal account 3 years ago. Brooke's phone, I said, my voice flat. We won't say Brooke, Mira corrected gently. We will say an external device with legacy credentials. We have the IP address. It matches the Wi-Fi network at the Lake Briar Country Club during the engagement party, and later, a residential IP that traces to your sister's apartment complex. I felt a sick thud in my stomach. Mason borrowing her phone. Mason hacking my calendar while my sister was probably in the other room trying on wedding dresses. Exhibit C, Mira said, moving on quickly. The shell game. North Pine Advisory Group shares a bank routing number with Viridian Human Capital. We have the wire transfer records from the engagement party deposit and the vendor application Grant tried to fast-track. This is the fraud hook. I said, he isn't just advising. He is trying to become a vendor. He is double-dipping. Exactly, Mira said. It is a violation of the conflict of interest policy. A strategic advisor cannot have a financial interest in a vendor contract without disclosure. He didn't disclose it. Grant didn't disclose it. And finally, I said, reaching for the last folder, the photo. I pulled out the glossy print of Mason, Grant, and the Halcyon CEO sitting in the hotel bar, dated 6 weeks ago. This proves the conspiracy. I said, they were cooking this deal before the board was even notified of an offer. They rigged the process. Mira looked at the photo, then at me. You know Grant will go nuclear when you drop this, she said. He will fire you on the spot. He will scream about privacy. He can't fire me. I said, I am the chair. Only the board can remove me. And once they see this, if they vote to remove me, they are becoming accessories to securities fraud. They are greedy. Mira. But they are not suicidal. I closed the binder. The snap of the ring sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. We are ready, I said, but I wasn't, because the hardest part wasn't the boardroom. It was the living room. I drove to my parents' house in Wexford Glen that afternoon. My mother had called 3 times, her voice tight with that specific frequency that meant mandatory attendance. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Mason's rental car, a sleek, black sedan, parked next to my father's truck. I gripped the steering wheel. I had to go in there. I had to sit at the table and break bread with the man who was trying to destroy me. And I had to do it without tipping my hand. I walked inside. The house smelled of roast chicken and tension. Natalie! My mother cried, rushing to hug me. She felt frail in my arms. You are late. Everyone is waiting. I walked into the dining room. Brooke was there, looking radiant but manic, her eyes too bright. Mason sat next to her, his arm draped over the back of her chair, owning the space. Hello. Natalie, Mason said, smiling. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had already won. I sat down. Hello? Mason? Brooke? We have news! Brooke burst out before I could even unfold my napkin. She grabbed Mason's hand and held it up. We are moving the date up, she said. We are getting married in 2 weeks. I froze. 2 weeks? Mason's schedule is changing, Brooke explained, talking fast. He has to be in Singapore next month for a huge project, and he wants me to come with him, so we are just going to do it. A courthouse ceremony, then a big dinner. It is so romantic, right? I looked at Mason. He was watching me, his eyes cold and amused. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was accelerating the timeline. He was locking her down before the board meeting could blow up his cover. That is sudden, I said. And there is one more thing, Brooke said, her voice dropping a little. Since we are moving so fast, and Mason's assets are all tied up in international transfers right now, we found this amazing condo in the city, but the management company is being difficult about his foreign income documentation. I knew what was coming. I could feel it like a physical weight. We need a co-signer, Brooke said. Just for the lease. Just for 6 months until his transfer's clear. It is just a formality. Nat, you have perfect credit. It would mean so much to us. I stared at her. Mason Crowell, the man who worked for a tech giant, the man who flew private, the man who was optimizing the future, needed his fiancé's sister to co-sign a lease? It was a power move. It was a test. If I signed, I was complicit. If I refused, I was the villain. I put my fork down. No, I said. The silence in the room was absolute. What? Brooke whispered. I said no. I repeated, keeping my voice steady. I won't co-sign a lease, Brooke. If Mason is who he says he is, he can pay 6 months of rent up front. Any landlord would accept that. He doesn't need my credit. Mason sighed, a sound of patient disappointment. Natalie, he said smoothly, it is not about the money, it is about the liquidity. My capital is deployed in high-yield vehicles. Moving it prematurely triggers tax events. I was just trying to keep things simple for Brooke. But if you don't trust me, I don't trust the math. Mason, I said. Brooke stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. You are unbelievable, she spat. You are actually unbelievable. Brooke, sit down, my father said, looking alarmed. No, she shouted. She has been doing this since the beginning. She hates him. She hates that I found someone. She wants me to be alone and miserable like her. Brooke, look at me, I said, staying seated. This isn't about you. It is always about me, she screamed. You think I'm stupid. You think I can't pick a good man. You think I need you to save me? Well, I don't. I am getting married in 2 weeks, and you are not the maid of honor. You are not even invited. She turned and ran out of the room. We heard the front door slam. Mason stood up slowly. He adjusted his cufflinks. I should go after her, he said. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. His lip curled in a sneer. You are making this very hard on yourself. Natalie, he said softly. He walked out. I sat there, staring at the roast chicken. Natalie, my mother said, her voice trembling. Why? I looked at her. Mom, he is lying to her. He is a fraud. My mother slammed her hand on the table. I don't care, she cried. I blinked. What? I don't care if he's exaggerating, she said, tears streaming down her face. He makes her happy. Natalie, for the first time in years. She is not calling us crying about money. She is not depressed. She has hope. Why do you have to ruin it with your reality? Because the reality is going to crush her. Mom, I said, he is using her to get to my company. Your company, my mother said bitterly. It is always about your company, your career, your reputation. You have always been the responsible one. Natalie, the perfect one, and you use it like a sword. You cut everyone else down because they are not as perfect as you. I felt the words hit me like stones. Is that what you think? I asked, my voice shaking. That I do this because I want to be perfect? I do this because I am the only one catching the falling glass. I paid her rent. I paid for Dad's surgery. I pay for everything. And we resent you for it, my mother shouted. The truth hung in the air, ugly and naked. They didn't want my protection. They wanted their illusion. They resented me because my competence reminded them of their chaos. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I will fix this, I said quietly. And one day, you will thank me. But I don't expect you to like me while I do it. I walked out of the house. I didn't look back. I gave Brooke 24 hours to cool down. Then I texted her. Marrow Street Cafe, 1 hour. I have proof. Not about the money, about the lies. She didn't reply, but when I walked into the cafe an hour later, she was sitting in the back corner, wearing sunglasses indoors. She looked small. I sat down. I didn't order coffee. Thank you for coming, I said. She didn't look at me. I am only here to tell you to leave us alone. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was the photocopy of the board memo I had found in her binder, the one with the red confidential stamp. I slid it across the table. Do you recognize this? I asked. She glanced at it. It is the scrap paper Mason had. So what? Brooke, look at the header, I said. She looked. Astera Systems Board, eyes only. This is a classified document, I said. Each copy is numbered. This is copy number 4. That is my copy number. She frowned. What are you saying? I am saying this document was in my locked briefcase inside my office at Astera. I said, I never brought it home. I never gave it to anyone. Then how did Mason get it? She asked. That is the question. Brooke, how did Mason get a document from inside my office? She went still. I watched the gears turn in her head. She was trying to find a benign explanation. Maybe you dropped it. Maybe he visited you. But he hadn't visited me, and I hadn't dropped it. There is only one way, I said gently. Did Mason ever use your laptop? The one I gave you? Brooke looked down at her hands. He set up some security stuff for me, she whispered. He said he wanted to make sure my banking was safe. He installed a VPN, and he added a work email profile so we could share a calendar. I nodded. A work email profile. That profile gave him a bridge. Brooke, he used your device, my old device, to authenticate into my system. He didn't just find this paper. He printed it. From your apartment. Brooke took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were swollen. He hacked you? She asked, her voice trembling. He used you to hack me, I said. She stared at the paper. The reality was finally piercing the armor of her denial. This wasn't about liquidity or NDAs. This was theft. This was a crime. He told me it was scrap paper, she said, a tear rolling down her cheek. He was writing a grocery list on the back. I reached out and covered her hand. Brooke, I am not asking you to leave him right now. I know that is too hard. I know you are scared. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want you to ask him. Ask him what? Tonight, when you go home, I want you to ask him 3 simple questions. Don't fight. Don't accuse. Just ask. I pushed a napkin across the table. I had written the questions down. 1. What is the name of your direct supervisor? 2. Why is the engagement party contract paid by North Pine Advisory? 3. Did you print a document from my sister's company on our printer? Brooke read them. He will get mad, she said. Watch how he gets mad. I said, does he answer the question? Or does he attack you for asking? Brooke took the napkin. She folded it into a tiny square. Okay, she said. I will ask. I waited by my phone all night. The hours dragged like lead weights. At 11:30, my phone buzzed. It was Brooke. He is asleep, she whispered. She sounded terrified. What happened? I asked. I asked him. She said, I waited until we were eating dinner. I asked him the name of his supervisor. And? He laughed. He said, I report to the board. Babe, you know that. Then I asked about North Pine. I held my breath. He stopped eating. Brooke said, he put his fork down. He got really quiet. He said, who have you been talking to? I told him I just saw the name on the contract. He said, that is just a billing vehicle. It is tax stuff. Why are you interrogating me? Did you ask about the document? I pressed. Yes, she said. Her voice broke. I asked him if he printed the Astera memo. Silence on the line. Brooke? He started crying. Natalie, she said. He what? He started crying. He threw his napkin on the table and stood up. He said, I do everything for us. I work myself to death. I pay your debts. I buy you a ring. And you treat me like a criminal because your jealous sister is poisoning your mind. He was sobbing. Nat, he looked so hurt. I closed my eyes. The performance. The weaponized victimhood. Then what happened? I asked. Then he stopped. She said, like, instantly. He stopped crying. His face went completely blank. He looked at me, and his eyes were dead. He said, If you ever question my integrity again, Brooke, I will walk out that door and I will never come back, and you will be back in that studio apartment drowning in debt. She took a ragged breath. Then he went to bed. He just turned off the light and went to sleep. I felt a cold rage burning in my chest. He had shown her the monster. He had threatened her with abandonment and poverty. Brooke, you need to get out of there. I said, come to my place. I can't. She whispered, I can't leave him. Nat, the wedding is in 2 weeks. Everyone knows. If I leave, I am a failure. Again, you are not a failure. Brooke, you are a victim of a con artist. I have to go. She said, he might wake up. She hung up. She wasn't leaving. The shame was too strong. He had calculated it perfectly. He knew she would rather live in a lie than face the humiliation of the truth. But now I knew. The bridge was burned. Mason knew Brooke was asking questions. He knew I was behind it. The endgame wasn't Monday. The endgame was now. Monday morning, the day of the vote. I arrived at Astera at 6 a.m. I had called the external governance firm, Beacon Oversight. 2 senior auditors were waiting for me in the lobby. They were men in gray suits who carried clipboards and looked like they had never smiled in their lives. I need you in the boardroom. I told them, you are independent observers. You record everything. If anyone objects to your presence, you note it as a compliance red flag. Understood. Ms. Collins, I went up to the executive floor. I instructed IT to lock down the digital distribution. No iPads, no emailed decks. I placed a physical packet at each seat. The packets were sealed with tamper-evident tape. Inside was the evidence, the logs, the shell company map, the photo. I stood at the head of the table. I looked out at the empty chairs. This was the room where I had built my career. This was the room where I had earned the right to lead. And today, I was going to burn it down to save the company. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. But I knew the voice. You are about to make a mistake that hurts your sister. Think carefully before you embarrass her in front of people who matter. I can make the debt disappear, or I can make it very, very public. Your choice. I stared at the screen. He was threatening to expose Brooke's financial history. He was threatening to humiliate her to the world. I typed a reply. You are assuming I am still playing as a sister. I deleted the draft. I didn't reply. I put the phone face down on the table. I wasn't playing as a sister anymore. I wasn't playing as a daughter. The door opened. Grant Lasker walked in. Behind him was Mason Crowell. Mason was wearing a navy suit. He looked fresh, rested, and invincible. He saw me, and he smiled. Good morning. Natalie, he said. Big day. I looked at him. I didn't smile back. Take a seat. Mason, I said, we have a lot to get through. Grant looked at the independent observers in the corner. Who are they? Grant asked. Frowning. Governance, I said. Just a formality. To ensure the vote is frictionless. Mason's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He recognized the word. It was his word. I sat down. I waited for the rest of the board to file in. Darren Klein, Susan Chang, the others. They looked nervous. They sensed the electricity in the air. I placed my hands on the sealed packet in front of me. I looked at Mason. Think carefully. he had said. I had thought. I had thought for weeks. And now, I was done thinking. I picked up my gavel. The meeting is called to order, I said, and I watched the fear finally, truly, enter Mason Crowell's eyes. The boardroom on the 42nd floor was soundproofed, but the silence inside felt loud enough to rupture an eardrum. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, my hands resting on the cool leather of my folio. To my right sat Mira Vance, our general counsel, looking like a statue carved from granite. To my left, the empty chair that usually belonged to the vice chair, a seat currently occupied by an uncomfortable silence. Down the length of the table, the faces of the board members were masks of polite tension. They avoided my eyes. They checked their watches. They shuffled papers. They knew today was the day the axe fell, but they thought the neck on the block was mine. Grant Lasker sat at the opposite end. He looked impeccable, his suit pressed, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. Next to him, sitting in a chair that had been pulled up from the wall, was Mason Crowell. Mason did not look like an interloper. He looked like he belonged there more than I did. He had arranged his notepad and his expensive pen with geometric precision. He nodded at Darren Klein across the table. He offered a bottle of water to Susan Chang. He was performing the role of the steady hand, the necessary outsider who was here to save us from ourselves. On the large monitor mounted on the far wall, the faces of the Halcyon Byteworks executive team floated in a grid of high-definition pixels. They were watching us from Silicon Valley, mute and expectant. I checked the time. It was 10 o'clock sharp. I picked up the gavel. It felt heavy in my hand. I call this meeting of the Astera Systems Board of Directors to order. I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. It did not betray the fact that my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. We moved through the routine agenda items. Approval of minutes from the previous session. Review of the Q3 operational audit. The formalization of the Executive Compensation Committee. I performed the dance of bureaucracy. I asked for motions. I asked for seconds. I called the votes. All in favor? I asked. Aye. The room murmured in unison. Opposed? Silence. Grant was tapping his finger against the table. Tap, tap, tap. He was impatient. He wanted to get to the main event. He wanted to watch me fold, or he wanted to watch me die. I looked at Darren Klein. He was leaning back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked at Mason, then back at me. His eyes filled with a condescending pity. He had the vote of no confidence in his pocket, ready to deploy the moment I showed weakness. I turned the page of my agenda. Item 4. I read, Consideration of the acquisition offer from Halcyon Byteworks. The room shifted, spines straightened. The Halcyon representatives on the screen leaned in. Grant cleared his throat. Thank you. Natalie, as we have discussed in prior sessions, the offer of $42 per share represents a significant premium over our current trading price. Given the market volatility we have seen in the last week, specifically the rumors regarding our revenue miss, the executive team believes this is the optimal moment to exit. We have Mr. Crowell here to walk us through the final deal structure. Grant gestured to Mason. Mason stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He smiled at the room, a smile that was warm, confident, and utterly predatory. Thank you. Grant, Mason said. His voice was smooth, filling the room. Members of the board, I know these decisions are never easy, but the data is clear. The synergy between Astera and Halcyon creates a market leader that is future-proof. My analysis suggests that delaying this vote even by a week could cost shareholders upward of 15% in value. He paused for effect. I am here to ensure that does not happen, he said. I am here to help you do what is necessary. He looked at me. It was a challenge. I am here. I am inside. What are you going to do about it? I looked back at him. I held his gaze for a long second, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Thank you. Mr. Crowell, I said, please sit down. Mason's smile tightened at the edges, but he sat. Before we proceed to a vote on the acquisition, I said, I must invoke Article 7, Section 3 of our corporate governance bylaws. Grant frowned. What is this, Natalie? We don't have time for procedural delays. It is not a delay. Grant, I said, it is a requirement. The bylaws state that before a vote on a change of control, the board must address any credible integrity risks that have been formally logged with the General Counsel. Darren Klein scoffed. Integrity risks? Come on. Natalie, if you have a problem with the price, just say so. Don't hide behind the rulebook. I ignored him. I reached for the stack of sealed yellow envelopes sitting next to me. I picked them up and passed them to the corporate secretary. Please distribute these to the board members, I said. And one for Mr. Crowell. The secretary moved around the table, placing an envelope in front of each person. The sound of paper sliding on wood was the only noise in the room. Grant stared at the envelope in front of him. He didn't open it. Natalie, I am warning you, he said, his voice low and dangerous. If this is some kind of personal stunt. I looked at Mira Vance. Counsel, please summarize the contents of the evidence packet. I said. Mira stood up. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the Halcyon representatives on the screen, then at the board. The packet contains a chain of evidence regarding a coordinated effort to manipulate the board's decision-making process through fraud, unauthorized access, and undisclosed conflicts of interest. Mira said. Her voice was dry, clinical, deadly. Open the packets, I said. There was a rustle of paper. Board members tore open the seals. Turn to tab 1, Mira instructed. I watched Darren Klein. He pulled out the first page. It was a screenshot of the Tech Oracle blog post. On Wednesday of last week, Mira said, the chair circulated 3 draft versions of a revenue projection memo. Each version contained a unique, fabricated data point, a canary trap, version C, which projected growth of 7.4%, was sent exclusively to Director Darren Klein. Darren went pale. He stared at the paper. 12 hours later, Mira continued. That exact figure appeared in an anonymous leak to an industry blog. IT access logs confirmed that Director Klein opened the file on his mobile device 20 minutes before the leak was posted. Darren looked up. His face was a mask of panic. That proves nothing, he sputtered. I might have discussed it with an analyst. That is part of my due diligence. Unauthorized disclosure of non-public financial data is a violation of your fiduciary duty. Darren, I said quietly, it is cause for immediate removal. Turn to tab 2, Mira said, not missing a beat. Grant flipped the page. I saw his hand tremble slightly. This is a visualization of the corporate structure of North Pine Advisory Group, Mira said. As you can see, North Pine shares a registered agent and a bank routing number with a company called Viridian Human Capital. Mason shifted in his chair. He crossed his legs. He didn't look at the packet. He looked at the wall. 2 weeks ago, Mira said, the CEO recommended we fast-track a vendor contract with Viridian for employee retention software. This contract would have granted deep-level access to our personnel database. The evidence suggests that the strategic advisors sitting in this room stood to benefit financially from that vendor contract, a conflict of interest that was never disclosed. Grant slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous, Grant shouted. I didn't know about the bank routing number. How was I supposed to know? That is a compliance failure, not a conspiracy. Turn to tab 3, Mira said. Grant froze. Tab 3 was the photo. The room went silent as the board members stared at the glossy image, the hotel bar, the drinks, Grant Lasker, the Halcyon CEO, and Mason Crowell. The date stamp in the corner was circled in red. The CEO informed this board that he met Mr. Crowell 2 weeks ago. Mira said, this photograph was taken 6 weeks ago. It establishes a prior relationship and a coordination of strategy between the CEO, the acquiring firm, and the advisor before the acquisition offer was formally presented to this board. Grant looked at the screen. The Halcyon representatives were looking at something on their end, probably the digital copy of the packet we had just uploaded to the secure portal. Grant turned to me. His face was purple. "You had me followed?" he hissed. "You spied on me?" "I received that evidence anonymously from a whistleblower within the company." I said calmly, "I did not solicit it, but I verified it." Darren Klein stood up. His chair clattered backward. "This is a witch hunt!" he yelled. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She is out of control. She is fabricating this to save her job." I move for a vote of no confidence. I move to remove Natalie Collins as chair effective immediately. He looked around the room, desperate for support. "Second," Grant shouted. "I second the motion." I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I looked at the independent observers from Beacon Oversight in the corner. They were writing furiously on their clipboards. "There is a motion on the floor," I said. "But before we vote, there is one final piece of evidence regarding Director Klein's motion." I nodded to Mira. "Tab 4. Mira said. Darren froze. He hadn't turned the page yet. Tab 4 contained the log of the calendar spoofing. IT Forensics confirmed that on Tuesday morning, an unauthorized access to the chair's calendar was initiated. Mira said, "The access came from a device previously trusted to the network. However, the IP address of the device at the time of the attack matches the residential IP of a guest Wi-Fi network that Mr. Crowell has had access to." I looked at Mason. He wasn't looking at the wall anymore. He was looking at me. His eyes were dark, filled with a cold, venomous hate. But more importantly, Mira said, looking at Darren, "The internal email logs show that minutes after the fake meeting was created, Director Klein forwarded a screenshot of the calendar error to a private email address, mcrowell.northpine.net. Mira looked up. Director Klein was coordinating with Mr. Crowell to document the instability of the chair before the technical glitch had even been reported to IT. The room was deadly silent. Darren Klein sank back into his chair. He looked like a balloon that had been punctured. I looked at the board. We have evidence of insider leaking. We have evidence of undisclosed financial conflicts. We have evidence of collusion with the acquiring firm. And we have evidence of a manufactured campaign to destabilize the leadership of this board. I paused. "This is not a personality conflict," I said. "This is a governance crisis." I looked at Mason. I did not mention my sister. I did not mention the wedding. I did not mention the debt, or the tears, or the emotional blackmail. I kept Brooke out of it. I protected her dignity by burying her name under the weight of corporate statute. Someone used personal relationships to breach our governance protocols. I said, "We will not punish by gossip. We will respond by law and policy." Suddenly, the large monitor on the wall flickered. The lead representative from Halcyon Biteworks, a woman named Ellen, who had been silent until now, leaned into her camera. "Ms. Collins," she said. Her voice was tinny coming through the speakers. "Yes? Ellen?" "In light of the information presented in Tab 2 and Tab 3, she said, "Halcyon Biteworks needs to pause our participation in this process." Grant stood up. "Ellen, wait. These are just allegations. We can explain. The risk profile has changed." "Grant," Ellen said coldly, "we cannot be party to a transaction where the independent advisor has an undisclosed vendor interest. Compliance would never sign off on it. We are withdrawing our offer." "No!" Grant screamed. "You can't! We have a deal." "We are withdrawing the offer effective immediately," Ellen repeated. The screen went black. The deal was dead. For a second, no one moved. Then, the reality hit. The stock price was going to plummet. The golden parachutes were gone. The millions of dollars these people had been counting on had just evaporated into the digital ether. Susan Chang put her head in her hands. Another board member swore softly. Grant looked at the black screen. Then he looked at me. "You killed it," he whispered. "You burned it all down. Are you happy? Natalie? You saved your pride and you destroyed the company." I stood up. "I am not done." I said. I looked at the board. They were terrified. They were looking at a 50% drop in share price by the closing bell. "The company is not destroyed," I said, "but it is damaged. And to fix it, we need a clean break." I picked up a new document from my folio. "I am proposing a motion for emergency stabilization," I said, I read from the paper. First, the immediate suspension of Grant Lasker as CEO, pending an independent internal investigation. Grant opened his mouth to protest, but he saw the faces of the board members. They weren't looking at him with loyalty anymore. They were looking at him as a liability. Second, I continued, the immediate removal of Darren Klein from the board for violation of fiduciary confidentiality. Darren didn't even look up. And third, I said, my voice wavered for the first time. Just a fracture, a tiny crack in the armor. Third, upon the appointment of an interim committee to manage the company, I will voluntarily step down as chair of the board. The room gasped. Mira turned to look at me, her eyes wide. She didn't know about this part. Why? Susan Chang asked. You were right. Natalie, you saved us, because this recovery cannot be about me. I said, if I stay, the narrative will be about the fight. It will be about the factions. The market needs to see that we are cleaning house completely. We need a blank slate. I looked at Mason. He was still sitting there. He hadn't moved. He was watching me with a strange expression. It wasn't hate anymore. It was almost respect. The respect of a mechanic who realizes someone else knows how to take the engine apart. I am removing the personal narrative from the equation. I said, I looked at the independent observers. Do I have a second for the motion? I asked. Susan Chang raised her hand slowly. I second. She said, all in favor? Aye. The voices were weak, shaken, but they were there. Motion carries. I said, I banged the gavel. The sound rang out. Final and sharp. This meeting is adjourned. Security escorted Grant and Darren out of the building. Mason Crowell did not need an escort. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and picked up his notepad. He walked toward the door. As he passed me, he stopped. The room was emptying out. Mira was busy gathering the evidence packets. Mason leaned in close. He smelled of sandalwood and ruin. You know she will never forgive you, he said softly. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had almost stolen my family and my company in one smooth motion. She might not. I said, but she is free. Mason smiled. A small, sad smile. You think you won, Natalie, but you lost the chair, you lost the money, and you lost your sister. He adjusted his cuffs. I will find another deal, he said. There is always another deal. But you? You are just alone. He walked out. I watched him go. I watched the door close behind him. He was right. I was alone. I packed up my things. I put the gavel back in its velvet box. I took the nameplate that said Natalie Collins, chairwoman, and put it in my bag. I walked to the elevator. I took it down to the lobby. I walked past the security desk, past the turnstiles, out into the cold air of Cedar Ridge City. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stopped on the sidewalk. People were rushing past me, going to lunch, going to meetings, living their lives. I pulled out my phone. It was a text from Brooke. He just called me. He broke up with me. He said his assets were frozen and he had to leave the country. He said it was your fault. I stared at the screen. A second text popped up. I hate you. Don't ever talk to me again. I felt the tears prick my eyes. Hot, sharp tears. I had saved her credit score. I had saved her from a fraudulent marriage. I had saved her from being an accessory to a federal crime. But I had broken her heart. I put the phone away. I looked up at the glass tower of Astera Systems. It was still standing. The lights were on. The employees were working. The company was safe. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like exhaust and rain. It was over. But as I turned to walk toward the parking garage, my phone buzzed one last time. It wasn't Brooke. It was a number I didn't recognize. Justice is a nice concept, Natalie. But you didn't finish the job. You just moved the target. See you in the next quarter. I looked around the street. Faces blurred. Cars passed. He was out there. He wasn't gone. He was just moving to the next host. I gripped my phone. Let him come. I thought, I wasn't the chairwoman anymore. I wasn't the diplomat. I wasn't the nice sister. I was the woman who had burned down her own house to kill the rat inside. And next time, I wouldn't wait for the board meeting. I started walking, my heels clicking a rhythm on the pavement. Click, 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 the sound of a countdown. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you felt the tension in that boardroom as much as I did. Writing Natalie's journey was a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't against strangers, but against the people we love, and the lies we tell ourselves to keep them close. I would love to hear what you think. Did Natalie make the right choice by sacrificing her career to save the company? Or should she have found a way to keep her power? And what about Brooke? Do you think she will ever understand what her sister did for her? Please leave a comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I read every single one, and it is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have so many more twisted, emotional, and realistic dramas coming your way, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Until then, keep your eyes open and trust your gut.